So it's OCD Awareness Week. Let's keep spreading awareness, letting people know that OCD is not a choice, it's not fun, it's not quirky, that it's real. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This week is OCD Awareness Week. We have one day left to go and I'm so excited to be filming this video because OCD is something that I struggled with as a teenager and I'm all about raising awareness. I put some questions out on my Instagram. That's a lie. I put a little question box on my Instagram and you guys asked me some questions. I had so many come through and so I'm going to answer some of those and they're on my laptop because I'm filming on my phone, hence me looking down a bit. I'm not a medical professional. Everything that I say is going to be from my own personal lived experience. Please reach out and get support if you're struggling. I'll link some websites in the description. Was my OCD treated with medication or CBT or therapy? Personally, both. I did DBT, CBT, and I was also medicated, and that was something that worked really well for me, the combination of all three. I believe that it's not kind of like a one or the other. For me, it really was a combination, and exposure response therapy played a huge part in me getting to where I am now. Exposure therapy, for those of you who don't know, is when you are exposed to the anxiety and you're facing it head on, and that was really important for me. So a couple of examples were that I hated wearing jeans. I avoided wearing jeans, didn't like wearing them, which is weird because now I like live in jeans. But I was made to come to all my appointments wearing jeans, and that was me being exposed to the fear and facing it head on. Another example is that I used to come into my appointments and I'd have to like sit up and down a few times, and so I'd come in and my, I was gonna say my teacher, but my therapist would be like, okay, sit down once, and then we'd sit there and would wait for the anxiety to pass because it always did. That's a very brief overview. It needs to be done with a medical professional, but yeah, I found exposure response therapy so helpful. At first, were your parents confused why you were acting like this? Yes, I think they were. I also think a lot of my rituals were done in secret, whether that's in the bathroom or my bedroom, so they didn't know for a long time what was going on. I think they were pretty aware pretty quickly that there was something going on, and I was actually talking to my mum about this the other day because I was like, how did you find out I had OCD? And apparently I was in the bathroom for quite a while doing my rituals in secret, as I did, because there was a lot of shame and embarrassment and I was scared that I was going to be stopped and then that would increase my anxiety, etc. And apparently I came out of the bathroom one day and I was like, Mum, I've got OCD. Like, it was almost like breaking point. I couldn't hold it in any longer. It was taking up a lot of my time, and so I spilled the beans, so to speak, and she wasn't surprised. She knew something had been going on. Did you find that they overlapped for you, your OCD and your eating disorder? 100%. It's not uncommon for OCD and an eating disorder to work together. In my case, anorexia and OCD, they really did play off each other. I was actually diagnosed with OCD first, and as a starting point, you know, my rituals were around a lot of checking and counting and doing things to make sure I was safe. And then when the anorexia jumped on board, a lot of them were about preventing weight gain or thinking I was preventing weight gain, which was not the case at all, and I'm very aware of that now, but yeah, they did really work together. I was reading my hospital notes a couple of days ago and it says in them that although majority of them were probably linked to my eating disorder, once the eating disorder developed, there were some pure OCD behaviours in there as well. What was the hardest part of everyday life for you with OCD? I think the hardest thing is when you're struggling with OCD, you know logically that the behaviour you're engaging in, opening a door 4 times, isn't going to be the difference between life and death, but that feeling is so real that you do it anyway. And so I think that was probably the hardest thing, knowing that it logically didn't make sense, but feeling that I had to do it, otherwise something terrible was going to happen. Is OCD often well portrayed in movies and TV shows? I don't think so. I think often in movies we see the cleanliness type of OCD, which is what a lot of people assume OCD is, and for some people that is the case, but there are actually many types of OCD, and often they're not portrayed in movies. So no, I don't think it is really widely talked about, and I think people know some of the common ones like checking and cleanliness and you know, fear of germs, etc. But there's ones around you know, sexual thoughts and intrusive thoughts, etc., that are just not discussed a whole lot, which makes the sufferer feel even more isolated and alone. So I'm not saying all movies don't portray it well, but the ones that I've seen have always kind of focused around the common stereotype of people thinking everyone with OCD is very clean and tidy. What was the most common compulsion you had to do? Well, as I've said before, a lot of my compulsions were around even numbers, so just having to do things a certain number of times. I know a big one for me was feeling like I had to do things until they felt complete, and so that might be opening a drawer or closing a drawer, and if it didn't sound right, I'd have to do it again, and then if it didn't feel right, I'd have to do it again. So I can't remember, I mean, probably checking my room, because that was something I did from the age of 10, checking that I was safe in my bedroom. But yeah, they just kind of morphed and developed, and as soon as you give into the OCD behaviour, more come along, and it just keeps growing and growing. So yeah. What were the first things you did to challenge your OCD when it was so bad? So something that I did with my therapist was put my compulsions, behaviours, rituals on a like thermometer or hierarchy, the ones that were going to be super hard to break and the ones that I felt were perhaps more able to break, the ones that maybe were new and not so ingrained. And so we started with those ones and worked up to the ones that were massive. And a big thing for me, and again, this is just my personal experience, please don't you know, take this advice because I'm not in the position to give you that, but something that I personally did was one of my behaviours was around star jumps. And so say I had to do, I don't know, 4 star jumps. On the third one, I'd have to do a little dance, and that was about me taking control over the behaviour instead of it having control over me. And so it was about mixing it up first and then decreasing it. And that was something that I found really helpful. Do you still fight urges to go back into rituals? So for me, when my anxiety is really high, I feel myself, you know, a bit on edge. I'm going to be completely open and honest. There are a couple of things that I still do that do not consume my life in any shape, way, shape or form, compared to what I went through, where it was all consuming to my day, to now, where perhaps I have to lock my car twice or 3 times. It's just not even comparable. But I'm in a position now that if I see any of those behaviours popping up, I have the tools and ability to stop them. And so I'm pretty good at being like, hey, is that turning into something? I need to tackle that right now, because I know that if I don't, it's going to become more ingrained. Did you ever feel embarrassed about your illness? Yes. I'll do a video on this. I felt a lot of shame for what I went through, more so my eating disorder. My OCD was something that, yeah, I don't know, I didn't talk about either. I just didn't think people really understood, and I think for a long time I didn't understand, and so that made things really difficult. But yeah, I did feel a lot of shame, and when I finally came out and shared my story with the world, I realised that there were so many people fighting a similar battle to what I was going through or what I went through, and that was incredible to know that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't the only one. Have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else even if you didn't want to? So a lot of my behaviours were around, or my rituals, were around protecting my family and myself from getting hurt. And so that was something that I struggled with, and I dealt with intrusive thoughts every now and then. It wasn't so common, the checking was kind of the main thing for me, but yes, that is something I experienced, and it was scary. And we challenged that in exposure therapy through a number of different ways, and that was extremely anxiety provoking, but it was very necessary. What would you say to someone who is battling OCD? If you learn to sit with that anxiety, which is extremely anxiety provoking but necessary, you will realise that those thoughts and those feelings do pass quicker and quicker each time, and that was a huge learning curve for me, that anxiety is just a feeling that, you know, logically I knew that nothing terrible was going to happen, and reminding myself that was really important too, and just challenging it head on. And knowing that each time I engaged or started a new behaviour, that it was going to become more ingrained and take up more of my time. And so sometimes that was enough for me to be like, no, I can't do that. I'm not doing that, because if I start that now, then it's getting up 5 times, and then 6 times, and then 7 times. Yes. Do you think mental health should be talked about in schools? 100%. I think we definitely need to be talking about it more in schools. We actually spoke in a school yesterday, and I'm always so privileged to be able to speak in schools, and also very encouraged when a school invites us in to speak, or anyone who has mental health experience, mental illness experience, who works in the mental health space, and to speak, because I think it's so important. And schools can try and avoid it, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people within the school that are struggling, and it's such a great time to target a lot of people at once, and especially when people are young. So yes, mental health should be taught in schools. Is it our fault? Absolutely not. And I think this is something that took me a long time to learn, that I never chose to be unwell, and that OCD was not something that I chose to have. It is a mental illness, and that's really important to remind yourself. that you did not choose to be this way, but you can choose to work on recovery and work against your OCD and work towards a better life. Did your OCD ever trick you into thinking it wasn't your OCD talking? All the time. I used to get so confused. I was like, is this a Jen thought? Is this an OCD thought? And OCD is such a powerful thing that you start to believe that it is your own thoughts. And so that was a big part of it for me, separating that and being like, hey, and really recognizing that and saying that out loud. This is an OCD thought. This is not a healthy Jen thought. This is an OCD thought. How old were you when you were diagnosed? I was diagnosed around the age of 12, 13. A bit blurry. I need to go look back at my notes. I got really bad around the age of 14, just as kind of my eating disorder jumped on board too. So yeah, but I'd been engaging in behaviours since the age of like 10, 11. What themes did you suffer from? So as I said before, I had or struggled with intrusive thoughts, and I also struggled with checking, counting numbers, and repeating things. So for example, I'd have to read like a line in a book 4 times or 6 times, which was very boring. How did your OCD affect your eating disorder? Great question. So I think they kind of worked together, which made things a lot more challenging. When I became unwell with anorexia, my behaviours became a lot more eating disorder focused, not so much harm focused, although some of them still were. And so yeah, that made it very difficult. That repetitive nature and that feeling like I had to do something, otherwise something terrible was going to happen, made it really, really hard. What went through your head on a daily basis? Just numbers. I had numbers constantly in my head. I found a diary the other day, and like on 2 of the pages I'd written out like what I had to do in the day, and it was literally just 2 pages of numbers, and it means nothing to me now, but at the time I would have known exactly what each of those numbers meant and what was associated with those numbers, and it was just kind of like a whoa. I must have been so exhausted. My day was consumed by it, and I remember I used to wake up in the morning and just feel completely overwhelmed because there was so much that I had to do, and if I didn't get it done by the end of the day, my mind would punish me and tell me I had to do more the next day. So it was really difficult. Does it ever get any easier? Yes, now that I have the tools and the skills to be like, nah, not doing that, I feel really able to stay on top of it all and yeah, fight against it. Is there anything positive you've taken from it? I love that question. I've learned a lot from going through my battle with mental illness. I think, like I always share, one of the most important lessons I learned through my OCD journey is that anxiety is temporary. It's just a feeling, and it always passes. Learning to sit with that uncomfortable feeling and trusting that it will pass is so difficult, but it's extremely important. Okay guys, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to me share a bit of my OCD experience. Again, I want to make it important and clear that I'm not a medical professional. This is all my own experience. Please, please, please seek help and support, because you don't have to do this alone. And if you are struggling with OCD, I hope you know that there is a better life out there, that you can get through that, and it doesn't have to control your life anymore. And just stay strong. I'm fighting right alongside you.